She was just 16, polite, quiet, and sitting in first class for the very first time. But within minutes, a simple request for a blanket turned into her worst nightmare. Flight attendants accused her, passengers stared, and before anyone could understand why, she was handcuffed until her wrists bled. Everyone stayed silent until the plane landed, and her father walked in. What happened next made the entire crew freeze. Because her dad wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country. This is the story that shook the world and changed how one girl turned pain into power. It started with a simple request, a blanket. But within minutes, that simple request would turn into the worst nightmare of 16-year-old Amara Lewis's life. The plane cabin hummed softly as passengers settled into their seats. It was an evening flight from New York to Atlanta, filled with tired business travelers, families, and a few first-time flyers. The smell of coffee drifted through the air as the flight attendants moved up and down the aisles. Amara sat quietly in seat 22B, wearing her white hoodie and wireless headphones, scrolling through a movie on her tablet. She wasn't just another teenager on a plane. She was traveling home after spending a week at a student leadership conference where she had just won first place for her debate presentation. Her father, Marcus Lewis, the CEO of Lewis Tech Global, had been so proud. He told her to take first class on her way back. It was supposed to be a special moment. But everything changed when she pressed the small button to call a flight attendant. "Excuse me, ma'am," Amara said politely, when a woman in her mid-40s leaned toward her. "Could I get another blanket, please? It's really cold." The attendant gave her a sharp look. "You already have one," she replied curtly. "Yes, but it's thin," Amara said with a small smile. "If there's a spare, I'd really appreciate it." The woman sighed loudly, enough for nearby passengers to hear. "You people always want extra," she muttered under her breath. Amara blinked, unsure she heard correctly. I'm sorry?" The attendant's face hardened. "Don't raise your voice with me," she snapped. "Sit back and calm down." Amara looked around, confused. "I wasn't raising my voice," she said softly. But before she could finish, the attendant stepped away briskly and whispered something to a male crew member. Moments later, 2 uniformed airline security officers walked toward her row. "Ma'am," one of them said firmly, "we've received reports of a disruptive passenger." "What? No, that's not—" Before Amara could explain, one of the officers reached for her arm. "Please, stand up." Amara's heart started racing. "I didn't do anything," she cried. "I just asked for a blanket." Other passengers started looking over. Some frowned, others looked away, pretending not to see. The taller officer grabbed her wrist. "Calm down, miss, or we'll have to restrain you." "Restrain me? For what?" she gasped. "I'm not fighting anyone." But it was too late. The second officer yanked out a pair of silver handcuffs. "Please, stop!" Amara shouted as they forced her arms behind her back. The metal dug deep into her skin. "I didn't do anything." "You're hurting me!" Her voice cracked with fear, but the officers ignored her. A few passengers pulled out their phones, quietly recording. One older woman whispered to her husband, "This doesn't look right." But no one spoke up. The lead flight attendant, the same woman who started it all, crossed her arms. "That'll teach her some respect," she muttered. Amara's hands were shaking, the cuffs biting into her wrists until they bled. "Please," she sobbed. "I just want to call my dad." "Sit down," one officer ordered. They pushed her back into her seat. The whole cabin was silent now, except for her quiet, muffled cries. A little boy across the aisle turned to his mother and whispered, "Mommy, why are they hurting her?" The mother looked away, whispering, "Don't get involved, sweetie. Just don't look." Amara's tears fell onto her white hoodie, turning small patches red from her wrists. She stared out the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. In her mind, she kept replaying her father's words. "If you're ever in trouble, call me, no matter what." But her phone was gone. The same flight attendant had taken it, claiming it was airline property during investigation. The minutes felt like hours. Every second was filled with humiliation, fear, and disbelief. She had always believed that if you were polite, if you followed the rules, people would treat you fairly. But that night, 35,000 feet above the ground, Amara learned a cruel truth. Sometimes, the world doesn't care about your manners, your achievements, or your innocence. It only cares about the color of your skin. And as the plane continued to slice through the night sky, the only sound that broke the silence was a soft, stifled sob, a scream that no one dared to hear. The cabin lights dimmed, but Amara's world had already gone dark. Her hands throbbed with pain. Each heartbeat sent a sting through the deep red marks left by the metal cuffs. She tried to breathe, but every glance from the passengers made her chest tighten. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody asked if she was okay. The flight attendants moved past her row like she was invisible. One even rolled the drink cart right by her without saying a word. When Amara whispered, "Excuse me, can I have some water?" the attendant didn't even look at her. Instead, she stopped at the next row and smiled at another passenger. It was like she didn't exist. Minutes turned into hours. Amara could feel her fingers going numb. She turned to the officer seated beside her, who was assigned to monitor her. "Sir," she said softly, "please, these are too tight. My wrists are bleeding." He avoided her eyes. "Just stay still until we land," she swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I promise. I just asked for—" "I said be quiet." He cut her off. Her eyes filled again, but she stayed silent. She didn't want to give them another excuse to say she was being disruptive. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, the lead flight attendant, Supervisor Collins, was reviewing a report on his tablet. He typed in cold mechanical words. Passenger refused to comply with instructions, showed aggressive behavior. Restraint necessary, aggressive behavior. Amara's aggression had been asking for a blanket and questioning why she was being yelled at. But in Collins's mind, she didn't look like someone who belonged in first class. To him, that was enough. A few rows behind Amara, two women whispered to each other. "This is wrong," one said under her breath. "I know," the other replied, "but if we say something, they might kick us off the flight too." And so, they stayed silent. The silence was worse than the pain. At one point, a young man, maybe in his 20s, stood up with his phone in hand. "Hey, this is not right," he said loudly. "She's a kid." Supervisor Collins glared at him. "Sir, sit down immediately, or you'll be removed when we land." The man hesitated, then slowly sat back down. He didn't delete the video, though. Amara stared at him, her eyes wet but thankful. It was the only kindness anyone had shown her that night. Back near the cockpit, a junior flight attendant whispered nervously, "Sir, maybe we should loosen the cuffs." "She's bleeding." Collins shot her a glare. "Do your job. Don't question procedure." "Procedure?" the young woman murmured, her voice trembling. "She's 16. Collins ignored her and continued walking down the aisle, his chin high, as if cruelty was authority. Every time Amara shifted in her seat, the cuffs scraped deeper into her skin. The dried blood had begun to stick to the metal. Her head rested against the window, tears tracing lines down her face. The reflection staring back at her didn't look like the confident, bright girl who won a leadership award just days ago. She looked broken. She thought of her father again, his warm voice saying, "You're stronger than you think, Amara. Never let anyone make you feel small." But right now, she felt smaller than ever. Up front, the captain's voice finally came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, We'll be landing in approximately 30 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Amara shut her eyes. 30 minutes, she thought. Just 30 more minutes, and I can call Dad. He'll fix this. He always fixes everything. But she had no idea what was waiting at the gate. Because as that plane descended, her father was already on his way to the airport. And the moment he saw his daughter's wrists, the world would stop. The wheels touched down with a jolt. For most passengers, it was just another landing. But for Amara, it felt like the final stop before her nightmare got worse. As the plane slowed to a crawl on the runway, she saw blue and red lights flashing outside the window. Police cars, her chest tightened. They called the police, she whispered to herself. Supervisor Collins unbuckled his seatbelt, smoothing his uniform with satisfaction. Good, he muttered. They'll deal with her properly. The other attendants nodded quietly, some avoiding eye contact with Amara. The young flight attendant who had earlier questioned Collins stood frozen, guilt written all over her face. The captain's calm voice came through the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while local authorities board the aircraft. A ripple of confusion spread through the cabin. Passengers whispered, Authorities? What happened? Some already knew. They had watched it unfold, but none expected the scene about to come. The cabin door opened. 2 police officers stepped in, followed by an airport security manager. Their eyes immediately found Amara, a small, trembling girl with tear-streaked cheeks and wrists covered in blood. One officer frowned. Who restrained her? Supervisor Collins stepped forward. I did. She was aggressive toward crew members. We had to keep everyone safe. Safe? The officer repeated, his brow furrowing. He turned toward Amara. Miss, what happened? Amara tried to speak, but her voice came out broken. I didn't do anything. They hurt me. I just asked for a blanket. The officer knelt beside her seat, inspecting the cuffs still biting into her skin. She's bleeding, he muttered. Then to Collins. Why wasn't medical assistance called? Collins crossed his arms. We followed protocol. The officer exchanged a look with his partner, one of disbelief. Well, that's not how protocol works where I come from. Passengers started murmuring, louder this time. She's just a kid. This is insane. I have it all on video. Collins's face went pale. Stop recording, he barked, but nobody listened. The officers helped Amara stand. She stumbled, dizzy and weak. Her voice shook. Please, call my dad. His name is Marcus Lewis. The officer looked sympathetic. We'll notify him once we're off the plane, okay? But fate was faster than any phone call, because at that very moment, outside the gate, the airport entrance doors flew open. A tall man in a gray suit stormed through, his face carved with fury and fear. His presence alone turned heads. 2 men in suits rushed behind him, one holding a phone, the other whispering updates. It was Marcus Lewis, CEO of Lewis Tech Global, a name that every major corporation in the country knew. And right now, he wasn't a CEO. He was a father whose little girl had been hurt. Security tried to stop him, but he shoved past them, shouting, Where is my daughter? His voice thundered through the terminal, echoing off the glass walls. Passengers and staff turned to look. The airport manager hurried forward, trembling. Sir, please calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Marcus barked. I got a call saying my daughter was in police custody. For what? The manager stammered. It's a misunderstanding, Mr. Lewis. She was... But before he could finish, the cabin door opened again. The officers were escorting Amara out. Marcus froze, her wrists raw, red, and bleeding. Her face streaked with dried tears. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then rage filled his eyes. He stormed forward, his voice shaking the air. What happened to my daughter? Everyone went silent. Even the passengers exiting behind them stopped in their tracks. Supervisor Collins stepped out, trying to maintain authority. "Sir, please step back. We had to restrain her." Marcus's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "You restrained a child? My child! Sir, she was being disruptive." "Disruptive," Marcus snapped. "You put handcuffs on a 16-year-old girl for asking for a blanket." The officers stayed quiet. They knew this wasn't just a scene. This was a storm. Marcus turned to the officer who was still holding the cuffs. "Take them off her, now." The officer immediately did. "Yes, sir." As the metal clicked open, Amara fell forward, sobbing. Marcus caught her in his arms, holding her tightly. "I'm here, baby," he whispered. "I've got you." Then he stood, towering over the crew, his eyes burning. "You have no idea who you just humiliated, but you're about to find out." The terminal was frozen. Every whisper, every movement, stopped the moment Marcus Lewis spoke. The man who built billion-dollar deals with a handshake now stood before them, eyes burning, voice like thunder. He held his daughter's trembling hand, blood still glistening on her skin. "Who did this?" he demanded. No one answered. The airport manager tried first, his voice shaking. "Mr. Lewis, please, let's discuss this privately." Marcus cut him off, his voice sharp. "Privately? You handcuffed a child in front of an entire plane. You think this is going to stay private?" Supervisor Collins stepped forward, trying to maintain his authority. "Sir, with all due respect, we were following procedure." "Your daughter." "Don't you dare say procedure to me," Marcus interrupted, stepping closer. "I've spent 20 years training leaders on accountability, and what I see here is cowardice and racism." The crowd gasped. Collins swallowed hard. "Sir, she became aggressive." "We had to—" "Aggressive?" Marcus's voice cracked with anger. "She's 16. You called two grown men to handcuff a child because she asked for a blanket?" The younger flight attendant, the one who had stayed silent, suddenly spoke up. Her voice shook. "Sir, she didn't do anything wrong." "I told them not to." "But Supervisor Collins said—" "Quiet!" Collins snapped, but it was too late. The truth was spilling out. Marcus turned to the officers beside him. "Did you see this girl? Does she look like a threat to anyone?" The officer hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir. Honestly, she looked terrified." "Exactly." Marcus nodded. "And you—" He turned back to Collins. "You saw her fear and decided to make it worse. You abused your authority because you thought no one would hold you accountable." Collins's face turned red. "Sir, I didn't know who she was." Marcus stared at him coldly. "That's the problem. You only care who people are, not what's right." Reporters had begun arriving now, cameras flashing. Someone had already posted the video online. Within minutes, hashtags were trending. Marcus straightened his tie and looked directly into one of the cameras. His tone shifted from rage to icy control. The voice of a man who had built empires. "I am Marcus Lewis, CEO of Lewis Tech Global. My daughter, Amara Lewis, was handcuffed and humiliated by this airline, not because she was dangerous, but because she was black and sitting in first class." The crowd murmured. The airline manager looked ready to faint. Marcus turned to his assistant, who had followed him through the chaos. "Get our legal team on the line, and make sure every video from those passengers is preserved. This will not be buried." He turned back to the crew one final time. "You owe her an apology." "Now," Collins stammered. "Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" Marcus raised a hand. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her." Collins turned to Amara, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry." Amara didn't say a word. She just looked at him, her eyes steady, no longer afraid, just disappointed. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders and began to walk away. "Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving." But before he stepped out of the gate, he stopped and looked back. "I built my company on respect and equality. Tonight, you reminded the world why that still matters." And with that, he walked away, leaving the crew frozen their uniforms suddenly feeling heavier than ever. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Justice for Amara had exploded across social media. Every major news channel replayed the shaky cell phone footage from passengers on that flight, the image of a teenage girl in handcuffs, her father's voice echoing across the terminal. You only care who people are, not what's right. The video hit 1 million views in less than 2 hours, and within a day, it had reached every corner of the world. Talk shows debated it. Activists shared it. But more than that, ordinary people felt it. Parents, teachers, teenagers, even airline workers who had stayed silent before started speaking out. Tantri, airlines scrambled to respond. They issued a carefully worded statement. We sincerely regret the incident involving Miss Amara Lewis. We are conducting a full internal review and are committed to retraining our staff to ensure such an event never happens again. But it was too late for damage control. Marcus Lewis held a live press conference. Outside Lewis Tech headquarters, cameras flashed as he stepped to the microphone, Amara by his side, her wrists still bandaged. He didn't come as a CEO this time. He came as a father. My daughter was handcuffed because someone decided she didn't belong in first class, he said calmly. This isn't just about her. This is about every young person who has been treated as less because of their skin, their background, or where they come from. His voice trembled for a moment as he looked at Amara. No amount of money or power can protect a parent from the pain of seeing their child cry for help, and no one answering. But we can make sure it doesn't happen again. The crowd clapped. Some cried. Reporters shouted questions, but Marcus simply placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder and walked away. Behind the scenes, the airline's board called an emergency meeting. Within 24 hours, 3 staff members, including Supervisor Collins, were terminated. The airline announced new anti-discrimination and sensitivity training for all crew members.